Perfect. Hi everyone. Thank you for being here with us today. I'm Stelios, the CEO of the Tesseract Academy. We're an education and AI consulting company. Our mission is to enable every business and professional make the most of emerging technologies, be it artificial intelligence, big data, or Web3. And as part of our mission, we organize a lot of free events. So very happy to have here with us today Phil and Gary, who are going to walk us through R&D tax credits and tax relief. As you might be aware, there's this program which is there to incentivize innovation and research in the UK ecosystem, which essentially gives you back tax incentives if you invest in research and development. I'm looking forward to a very interesting talk. There's also going to be a special offer for anyone who is on this call. We'll be sharing a HubSpot form where you can just fill in your details in order to receive a discount or some other offer. Phil will let us know about this later for your R&D application. So there's going to be, after the presentation, there's also going to be a Q&A session during which you can answer whatever question you want about the topic. So that's it on my end, and I'll step in the background and let you guys start the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Stelios.
Can everyone see the presentation?
I can see it, thank you.
Brilliant. So we've already covered a bit. I've only stuck my picture up, so I apologise, Gary and Max and Kevin.
No, don't worry about that.
But yeah, my name's Phil. I head up the technical team at a company called RnD Tax Credit Consultants. So we are a specialist R&D tax credit advisory firm, but we offer another number of other services in the space, like Kevin had said, with fundraising and patent box claims, to name a few. And I'll touch up on those at the end. I'll be doing most of the talking for the next 10-15 minutes or so, but both myself, Gary and Max will be here to answer any questions on the following topics. So we're going to give you an introduction to the R&D tax credit scheme. We'll cover how R&D tax credits are applicable in AI and data science, and then we'll cover fundraising and patent box. So first off, what is the R&D tax credit scheme? It is a government incentive to encourage innovation by reducing a corporation's company tax bill or providing a cash refund. It's only applicable if you're spending money on qualifying R&D activities. It is a retrospective scheme, so you get to the end of your accounting period, identify your qualifying activities and eligible spend, you put that in your tax forms, provide a report to justify the work, and you get your net benefit. It is available to any UK company doing qualifying R&D. Now, I have mentioned that twice, so it's going to be very important for this call. And just to note, you've probably heard of the scheme. It's been in the newspaper a lot for a lot of non-compliance over the past few years. This has been a combination of fraud and genuine mistakes in what people think is qualifying activity, which has led to HMRC updating their process in an attempt to tackle this. And it seems to be working. So there's been a lot of changes over the past few years to the scheme. To touch upon a few, what costs qualify as eligible spend. So you can now include cloud computing costs, which is very applicable for this line of work. But unfortunately, it excludes a lot of overseas subcontractor costs now, which is a big downside. If we know it's a retrospective scheme, so if we're looking back at 2 years, that's your limit to claim. But another change that recently came in was if you have never claimed R&D tax credits before, or if you've not made a claim in the past few years, then you have to give an advanced notification. Now, this has to be done within 6 months of your year end if you're working to a typical 12-month accounting period. And roughly as a benefit, so whatever you spend on qualifying R&D activities, you're going to get about 15 to 27% back as a net benefit. And that depends on if you're profit making, what you spend the money on, so subcontractors or staff, for example, the level of R&D across the company and how the project was funding. There's lots of things to consider when putting together a compliant claim. So I have mentioned qualifying R&D a number of times. So what is qualifying R&D? Now, most people in companies do some form of R&D, but not all R&D will be qualifying for tax purposes. Market research, for example, is research, but it's not qualifying for tax purposes. Similarly, if you're learning public information, build your own knowledge, training staff in a specific area, that's again can be research, but it's not qualifying research for tax purposes. So a project needs to make a genuine and non-trivial advance in science or technology, or I should say attempts to make one. It doesn't have to actually achieve the advance to be qualifying R&D. You also have to identify scientific or technological uncertainty that's not readily deducible, so not easy enough for a competent professional to figure out. Now that CP figure there stands for competent professional, and I think we could spend 20 minutes talking about what makes a competent professional. But loosely, a competent professional is someone that can demonstrate expertise in a given sector. So you have high-level qualifications, you could have just extensive experience working in that sector, or recognized contributions. So I can drive a car, I can change a tire, but I'm not a mechanic, you know. So I think that's a key consideration when you're thinking of who is undertaking the research. We have to be able to justify that they're a competent professional in the sector. So how does HMRC evaluate what research qualifies for tax purposes? The Department for Science, Innovation and Technology have come up with these guidelines for defining research and development for tax purposes. Now, they are guidelines. I've underlined that because instead of rigid rules, guidelines provide that flexibility for assessing qualifying activities. So R&D can vary significantly across industries. We've had people that are trying to reduce plastic in a component without impacting the structural integrity. And we've had other companies that are trying to develop like completely new natural language processing to interpret voice tones and human emotion on an automated call. Now, they're both R&D, but strict rules might not capture all the legitimate R&D activities. Whereas these guidelines, they provide a framework for assessing whether a project advances science or technology. So that's in a nutshell what R&D is, just so we're all on the same page. AI, I like to think of this as simulation of human-like intelligence. So it enables learning, reasoning, decision-making. It covers algorithms, data processing, computational models that allow you to perform tasks that typically require that human level cognition. So like problem solving, pattern recognition, and automation. For data science, this is a discipline for extracting insight and knowledge from a data set. So you use statistical analysis, machine learning, and so forth to inform decision-making and drive innovation. Now, these two disciplines generally go hand in hand. Some great news for anyone that is interested and working in this sector. The government seem committed to invest in this space. So they see the future of AI and data science as key to driving economic growth, improving public services, maintaining leadership for the UK in that innovation space. And furthermore, just a few weeks ago, the government published their latest action plan, where they aim to have a strong startup ecosystem for the UK to be a leader in building and adopting these technologies. Now, that's great news because this is not only where you want to be able to leverage the funding that's been pushed into this space, but then you can also get the benefits you're entitled to for undertaking the qualifying activities like R&D tax credits discussed here. So as well as companies, as well as the government, companies are investing heavily into AI and data science. They're developing truly groundbreaking applications. You know, we've seen DeepSeek, we've seen chatbots, automated data analysis, image generation. There's a ton of chatbots available that no one's ever seen before. You know, it's groundbreaking, right? But importantly, data science can be groundbreaking in what it does, but the foundations of technology might not be particularly new. And this is where what meets the bar for R&D for tax purposes becomes very important. So I just want to nod back to the guidelines here. It's not always easy to see what qualifying R&D is because of this wide scope of R&D across sectors, but it's even harder still when you're in fast-moving sectors where, you know, computing power and data availability just seems so much more ahead now than it was even just a year ago. And on the surface, it might seem like any project that uses these technologies qualifies for R&D tax credits. But if we just explore the framework around this, we'll see that might not be the case. So how do we apply the guidelines? Let's look at HMRC's position. I'm not going to read a ton of code guidelines to you, but what I want to emphasize again is HMRC will evaluate projects based on their contribution to scientific and technological advances, so not a business use case. You must be able to demonstrate a genuine attempt to advance the underlying technology that goes beyond existing knowledge or capability in a sector. So if you're using ready-made frameworks like OpenAI as a foundation for a chatbot, or if you're training algorithms with your own data set, there might be a great new business case, but there's not necessarily going to be a technological advancement. And next, your project must have some scientific or technological uncertainty that's not readily deducible by a competent professional. I'm aware it seems like I'm repeating myself here, but it's really important for how we apply the framework to the project to determine if what you're doing is qualifying. So for a competent professional, the solution can't be obvious. It can't be readily figured out by an expert in the field if they're using existing knowledge, techniques, or established industry practice. And that's where it gets really interesting and a bit of a grey area for a fast-paced sector like this, because it's harder to establish what industry practices are. So again, the key becomes focusing on the competent professional and their expertise in that sector in justifying if what you're doing is qualifying R&D. So is your project qualifying for R&D tax purposes? We have to consider the sector on a whole. So you might want to ask yourself questions like, am I developing new technologies, new methodologies, or am I applying existing ones to develop new use cases? Now, the latter one doesn't mean that you're not doing R&D, but it's a bit more nuanced to see if it meets the bar. Does your project have fundamental scientific or technological uncertainty on how to achieve the end goals? Or is the uncertainty in efficient use of existing technologies and integration of different technologies? Does my project significantly improve or adapt underlying science, or would the project goals be considered just optimizing and fine-tuning, for example? So if you're using large language models to orchestrate the flow of prompts and contexts, and you have this new business use case, it might be a novel application, but it may or may not qualify for R&D tax credits, depending on if you're able to identify advancing science or technology behind that. My last point would be I'd recommend you speak with an advisor who's an expert in the legislation. It can be pretty straightforward to identify qualifying activities, and it can be pretty easy to dismiss non-qualifying ones. But in this area, fast-paced, it can be a little more grey to get to the heart of whether your project meets the bar for R&D. So how would you support a claim for R&D tax credits? And so the first thing you want to do as you go through your project is document your work, and that would be good and bad. And this is something that we find takes a while to tease out of people, that nobody likes to discuss when things go wrong. Everyone wants to discuss their project and their progress in the best light. But when it comes to R&D tax credits, if you have tried to achieve something and it didn't work, then that's a really good sign that there might be qualifying R&D activities. No one's going to spend time and money doing something if they knew it wasn't going to work at the start. So there's potentially an uncertainty there. When it comes to documenting your work, you might want to ask yourself or record things like, when did your project start? What are you trying to achieve? What technology is already available in this space? And why did I have to try to do something different over what's already available? Why couldn't it meet my needs? What kind of testing did we do? What were the results of the tests? Did the results of the tests guide the next steps of your project? So that thought process is important to document. It didn't work, great, but it didn't work because of A, B, and C. So I had to go back a step and try another idea because. So documenting that thought process is another key element to justifying and supporting an R&D tax credit claim. Tracking costs. You can only claim for eligible costs. So, how much time did somebody spend on a project? Did you hire subcontractors to work on a project? What did they do? Do you have invoices? Have you purchased software and cloud computing costs purely to do your R&D. Another element would be the technical reports and supporting documentation. So do you have internal reports documenting that thought process? Do you have test data and results that we can compile to show where things went well, things didn't, how it guided that thought process? And do you have any publications showing thought leadership in journals, trade journals, for example? Again, I just want to encourage you, please speak with a professional early on. If you do it early on in your project, then you can make sure your advisor knows what your project is about. They can assess that project against the guidelines and see if there's compliant R&D activity either being planned or undertaken. And then they can advise on the types of records and the level of detail needed to justify a claim. I'm aware it might seem like there's a lot of information to keep track of here, especially when you've actually got to do the work. But when you have that consultation with the specialist, it doesn't have to be burdensome then to justify your claim. It's far better to do this at the start of a project than retrospectively scramble to gather all that data, up to 2 years after the fact. What did I do February in 2023? It's a hard one to get, whereas if you already have some level of record keeping to maximize your R&D claim, just look at building in a documentation process into your project that you can evidence your claim. We find a lot of people really just spend, 5 or 10 minutes, depending on the size of the claim, 5 or 10 minutes a week or a month, depending on the size of their claim, to build that documentation. So that was the bulk of the talk, but I just wanted to touch upon a few other subjects. So first, if we discuss fundraising for your projects, so we can get grant funding, debt financing, venture capital, private equity funding. They're just some examples. There is a wide scope of funding to support R&D. It is important to be aware different types of funding options can impact your ability to claim or the level of R&D tax credits you can claim. So again, I'd recommend you speak with a professional to see different funding options available to you. That is something we can help with. We can produce funding landscapes to see what fits your specific project. And next, R&D tax credits, they really go hand in hand with the patent box regime. And this is another way for a retrospective scheme to incentivize innovation in the UK. It allows companies to pay a reduced corporation tax of 10% on profits derived from a patented invention. So if you have a patent on a component in a product that you're selling, the entire profit from that product revenue stream can have the corporation tax reduced to 10%. Now, a few things to be aware of. It can take several years to get a patent, and there are lots of things to consider that can impact your ability to get a patent. So is the idea novel? What prior art is out there already that might overlap? And do you have any public disclosures that might impact things? So I said just a few slides ago that for R&D tax credits, you might want to show thought leadership and the fact that you're a competent professional in the sector by having publications or giving talks. But you have to make sure that you do things in the right order, because if you put your idea in the public domain before you file a patent application, that can invalidate your eligibility to get a patent. So again, I'd recommend you speak with an advisor so you don't fall foul of these considerations. Now, that's something we can help with, both ourselves here and Max, who spoke earlier, with a scoping exercise for patent box. And if applicable, and your idea is potentially patentable, Max and his team are able to support you with a patent application. At this point, I just want to say thank you for listening. It's a short talk. We were told about 10 minutes, and we're happy to provide any free reviews of your projects, give you any free consultations, or review past claims if you have any questions on previous claims that you've made. And at this point, does anyone have any questions?
I'd like to, sorry. Please, Mike.
Yeah. The one thing you mentioned about staffing costs and the people who are working, and you've mentioned some of the supporting costs you could do. What about administration staff to support those in their work? Because people don't work alone. They have a manager or an office administrator or a project manager for that team. They're not actually directly involved in doing that particular work, but nonetheless, they are vital to that success of that project. How do you see their time being involved?
Yeah, so you can claim for direct activities, so activities that are directly involved in resolving that uncertainty, but you can also claim for indirect costs. So if somebody's running payroll of people that are doing the R&D activities, or if someone's doing documentation, you can claim
That one, yes,
indirect
yes.
activities. Yeah.
Yeah, it was that documentation and the support of the project management of the team. They're not actually doing the R&D work, but nonetheless, they're without it. The rest of us, we just get on and do what we want to do. We don't worry about the paperwork. And I think you've rammed home the point quite elegantly. Documentation, documentation. Did I mention documentation? Do it all the time, and if you can do that with somebody else, then let the people get on with it who need to do the work. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Can I just say, first of all, thank you, Phil. A couple of things I'd like to make everybody aware. It is definitely just the UK, and there's probably some people around the table today that are from other countries. So, if you're working abroad, it's a UK company that we can help. And so, if you're working for a UK company, referral. We're happy to meet anybody and help anybody. So, a referral would be useful to the UK company you're working with. And I'd also say, when you've heard Phil today, it is obviously completely technical, but don't be put off talking to us about making a claim. There isn't going to be a fee for talking to us. If we can't help, there's no fee. And I think that's important, because I don't want you to decide yourself whether you can actually claim or not. Or even if you've got a claim in and it has been unsuccessful, whether we can help. Let us decide. Let us decide what the sort of claim size is. And the other thing I'd like to say as well is that we're happy to work with people. Our staff are expensive. It's a highly technical area that we're in, and so to retain the best staff, we have to pay them a lot of money. And what's happening in this sector is companies are choosing to only work with companies that are generating a large fee, and that worries me. That people that are starting out or have got not necessarily starting out in business, but maybe starting out in a new business, and are not getting support because it's relatively modest. Well, some of our best clients started off very, very modest, and so we're not put off by a relatively potential small claim. So I'd encourage everybody around the table, please come and talk to us. Let's look at your own circumstances and let's help where we can. Now, we've invited Max along today, I know, and Max is a patent attorney. So Max, would you like to have a chat and tell people what you do and so on, how we can help?
Sure. Thanks, Gary. So there's a whole, lecture series that could be done about patents. So I'll keep it very brief. And Phil gave a very good introduction there. The traditional use of patents is to provide a negative right in respect of a technical invention to stop others from doing something that's the subject of your patent. And the patent bargain is that you provide a publicly available write-up of how a particular invention works, and in exchange you get a right to stop others from doing that. In a very different sense, its patents can also be used as a basis for claims for patent box, and this is sort of a entirely separate bonus, you could call it, of having the patent system. And that, as Phil mentioned, is a really significant cut to the rate of corporation tax. In order to access that, you need a patent, and that is not that's not a straightforward process. It takes a long time, involves specialists like myself, and involves a very, very different application process compared to R&D tax credits. Effectively, you need to go up against a patent office and have an argument with them that whatever is the subject of your invention, as defined effectively by a sentence, by a patent claim, is new and inventive over what's come before. And there's much more I could go on to rant and say, but maybe I should end it by saying that it's very tempting to assume, from if you don't have a big background in patents, that patents are for earth-shattering inventions. They're for something that's really new and really, really different from what's come before. And that's not actually the case. That's a misconception. It just needs to be new and not obvious in light of what's come before. And if your focus is getting protection for the purposes of patent box, then actually it really doesn't need to be the widest patent in the world. It just needs to be a patent in respect of something that is used throughout your processes such that the entire patent box claim can cover it. So we have one client who's a kitchen appliance manufacturer, and they have a patent for some particular way in which they use grease, and this is some sort of really ludicrously tiny little feature that if you heard about it as an engineer in the field, you'd think is just a load of rubbish, but they get a patent for it. It's a very, very specific patent, but they do that because it's useful for the purposes of patent box. So please don't assume is the ending message. If you are working on technical things and you're interested in patents, either from the purposes of patent box or just to lock others out of the market with traditional use of patents, please do have a word. Very happy to have exploratory conversations.
Hi Matt, it's Kevin here. So just to kind of qualify, obviously what people think when they think of patents is they very much think, oh, that's very expensive to get all these things patented, and obviously can take a long time. But I guess what you're saying there is if you just want it for the patent box perspective rather than from the defensive perspective, that the cost could be significantly less. Is that a fair point?
As a lawyer, I
No,
put a
well,
lot of
as I
emphasis
say, I
on
know
the
I'm putting you
could be
on the spot a
point,
bit.
but no, I'm kidding. Yes, in principle is the answer to your question. Yeah, if it depends on what you're trying to achieve, and yeah, in principle, if you're happy to go for something that's quite constrained, as is sometimes useful for patent box purposes, then it could be quite a bit quicker and quite a bit cheaper than the typical.
Thank you.
Perfect. Any other questions?
No, it's
Yeah,
really
hi.
useful. Thank you. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I have a question, please. The thing is, like, once we have started a company and once the R&D has been implemented, so only when the guidelines is applicable, that's when we are supposed to apply for the R&D tax. Is that what you say?
It is a retrospective scheme. So yes, you get to the end of your financial year and the money you have spent on R&D is what you can then enter into your corporation tax forms. But there are some changes to the scheme. So as I say, from day one of your tax year, so if we're looking at January 1st through to December 1st, 31st, 2025, you have until 30th of June 2026 to submit an advance notification, but you can do it now, and it's probably best you get it done now because then you have the 2-year window to look back. So what I'd recommend is if you've incorporated a company and you're looking to start R&D now, you won't be able to claim until after your year end, but it's probably best to engage somebody now free of charge, have that consultation, make sure you've set things up right, and make sure you don't miss any deadlines to be able to claim.
All right, thank you so much.
Perfect. So thank you, gentlemen, for the very nice presentation. I'm going to be sharing the form URL with everyone who joined our call today. Thanks everyone for attending. Make sure to go also on our website to check some of the work we do, some of the programs we offer for those of you who want to learn more about AI. And we hope to see you again at some other of our events. And sorry, last thing, the recording for those of you who just want to review it is going to be available on our YouTube channel as well as on our website.
I think so. Just one thing, that link for those was it a framework or guidelines, Gary, Phil? Can you include that link there that was published in March 2023?
I certainly can. I'll pop them in the chat right now.
That'd be great.
Well, let's hopefully, thank you, Stelianos. Hopefully everybody that attended will speak, and because maybe we can help. If we can't, there won't be a fee. So I hope we meet from this point.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone. Have a great
Thank
day.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks very much for your time, gentlemen.
Thank
Thanks
you.
all.
Bye.
Nice to meet you all. Bye bye.